We live in a world that celebrates titles, trophies, and numbers on a screen, yet quietly suffers from exhaustion, anxiety, and emptiness. We have more tools, more data, more power than any generation before us, and still, so many people wake up asking a dangerous question: is this all there is? We chase success, but we feel disconnected. We accumulate power, but we lack purpose. We move faster every year, yet somehow drift further from meaning. And at the center of this contradiction is how we define leadership, not just in organizations, but in families, community, and society itself. Leadership, as we practice it today, is often treated as a reward, a badge of honor, a symbol of having made it. We elevate people because they produce results, hit targets, and outperform others. But here's the uncomfortable truth: status can make you powerful, but it cannot make you fulfilled. Authority can force compliance, but it cannot inspire commitment. And progress measured only by outcomes, without regard for people, eventually collapses under its own weight. At its core, leadership was never meant to be about being in charge. It was meant to be about taking care of those in your charge. True leadership begins not with what we do or how we do it, but with why we do it. The why is not a slogan on a wall or a line in a presentation. It is the belief that gives our actions meaning. When leaders lose sight of their why, people become resources instead of human beings, and work becomes a transaction instead of a contribution. This loss of purpose shows up everywhere. Burnout is no longer an individual weakness. It is a systemic failure. People are working harder than ever, yet feel less valued. They are connected digitally, yet emotionally isolated. Fear-based leadership drives short-term performance through pressure, control, but it erodes trust, creativity, and resilience over time. When fear becomes the strategy, people stop thinking, stop caring, and eventually stop believing. Organizations built without purpose may look successful on paper, but they quietly drain the humanity from those inside them. Leaders who prioritize results over people may win quarters, but they lose cultures. They create environments where self-protection replaces collaboration, where silence replaces honesty, and where survival replaces growth. And when leaders operate this way at scale across institutions, governments, and economies, inequality deepens, trust fractures, and society itself becomes fragile. Service is the antidote. Service is not weakness, and it is certainly not self-sacrifice without boundaries. Service is the decision to use power to protect others, not elevate oneself. It is the courage to measure success by the well-being of people, not just the efficiency of systems. Leaders who serve understand that their job is not to be the smartest person in the room, but to create a room where others can do their best thinking. Trust is the currency of all healthy human systems. And trust is built when people feel seen, safe, and supported, when leaders listen before they command, when they explain the why before demanding the what. People lean in. They give discretionary effort. They take responsibility not because they are told to, but because they want to. This is how cultures of loyalty, innovation, and long-term strength are formed. The challenge of our time is not a lack of talent or technology. It is a crisis of responsibility. We have confused leadership with status and forgotten that it is first and always a service to something bigger than ourselves. Progress without purpose is not progress, it is acceleration toward emptiness. Growth without care is not success, it is extraction. But there is hope, because leadership is not a position, it is a choice. Every day, in small moments, we decide whether we will act from fear or from belief, from ego or from service. When individuals reconnect with their why, work becomes meaningful again. When leaders commit to empathy, courage, and integrity, systems begin to heal. When communities choose long-term thinking over short-term wins, trust can be rebuilt. So the call to action is simple, but not easy. Redefine success. Ask not how much authority you have, but how many people you have helped grow. Lead not to be seen, but to serve. Build organizations and societies that exist to advance human life, not just extract value from it. Think beyond the next quarter, the next election, the next promotion, and commit to a future where leadership is measured by impact, not image. Because when leadership becomes service, people flourish. When people flourish, systems endure. And when we choose to serve something bigger than ourselves, we don't just create better leaders, we create a better world. Leadership is often misunderstood in our society. Many people see it as a position of power, a title, a symbol of success, or a reward for individual achievement. They equate leadership with authority, with being in charge, with having others report to them and obey their instructions. They measure it in terms of status, perks, and influence, believing that the higher they rise, the more of a leader they become, but this perception is fundamentally flawed. Leadership is not a reward for achieving status, nor is it a prize for outperforming others. Leadership is a responsibility to serve, to protect, and to enable those in your care to succeed, thrive, and reach their potential. It is not something you take for yourself. It is something you choose for others. True leaders understand that their authority is not a personal asset to wield for their own benefit, but a tool to support and empower the people around them. When leadership is treated as a reward, it distorts priorities. Leaders become focused on metrics, recognition, and personal advancement. They chase accolades, promotions, and visibility while neglecting the people they lead. Decisions are made to protect reputation, secure short-term gains, or assert dominance rather than to cultivate growth, learning, and long-term success. In these environments, people feel like cogs in a machine, valued only for their output and not for their humanity. Work becomes transactional, compliance replaces commitment, and engagement erodes. People may follow these leaders, but they follow reluctantly, out of obligation, rather than inspiration, and the results are fragile and unsustainable. Serving as a leader requires a mindset shift from me to we. It means putting the needs, growth, and well-being of others above personal ambition. This does not mean ignoring performance or accountability. It means redefining what success looks like. Success is measured not by how much power one holds or how impressive one's resume appears, but by how effectively one nurtures talent, builds trust, and fosters an environment where people can contribute their best work. Leaders who serve ask themselves questions like, are my people safe? Do they feel supported? Are they empowered to innovate, speak up, and challenge the status quo? Do they understand the purpose behind what they are doing? By focusing on the people rather than the perks, leaders create cultures of engagement, resilience, and loyalty. Service-driven leadership also demands humility. It requires recognizing that authority does not make one infallible. Leaders do not have all the answers, and they do not exist to showcase brilliance or assert control. They exist to listen, to learn, and to provide guidance where it is needed. Humility allows leaders to admit mistakes, seek feedback, and make decisions that prioritize collective benefit over personal gain. When leaders act from humility and service, they cultivate trust, and trust is the currency of any high-functioning organization. Without trust, compliance may exist, but commitment will not. People will follow only as long as they have to, and morale, innovation, and collaboration will suffer. Another essential aspect of leadership as service is empathy. Leaders must be able to understand and relate to the experiences, struggles, and aspirations of those they lead. Empathy allows leaders to see beyond metrics and deadlines to the human beings who drive results. It compels leaders to consider how decisions affect people's lives, how policies shape behavior, and how culture influences engagement. Leaders who lead with empathy create environments where people feel valued, understood, and heard. When people feel this way, they are more willing to take risks, invest energy, and stay committed to a shared mission. Finally, leadership as service requires courage and long-term thinking. Serving others often means making difficult decisions that may not produce immediate recognition or reward. It may involve standing up for what is right rather than what is expedient, protecting people from harmful practices, or challenging systems that prioritize short-term results over long-term health. Leaders who understand that their role, their responsibility to serve, are willing to endure discomfort, criticism, or slower progress because they know the stakes are not about themselves, they are about the people and the legacy they are entrusted to cultivate. When leaders embrace the responsibility to serve, they transform organizations, communities, and society. They create cultures where people feel safe, respected, and motivated to give their best. They inspire loyalty, foster innovation, and build resilience that endures beyond any single project, quarter, or tenure. Leadership becomes less about hierarchy and more about humanity. It becomes a practice of stewardship rather than self-interest. It becomes a commitment to something bigger than oneself, a dedication to helping others succeed, grow, and flourish. In this view, the measure of leadership is no longer the status it confers, but the positive impact it leaves on the lives of those who follow. Leadership is not a reward to be claimed. It is a responsibility to be honored. Purpose is the reason we do what we do, the guiding principle that gives meaning to our actions, decisions, and relationships. It is the answer to the question why. Why we show up, why we persevere, why we lead, why we care. Without purpose, work becomes mechanical, engagement fades, and people lose sight of the larger vision that connects their individual efforts to something greater. Purpose is not a tagline, a mission statement on a wall, or a set of values written in a document. It is a lived experience, a deeply felt conviction that shapes behavior, informs choices, and inspires others. When leaders, teams, and organizations operate from a clear why, everything changes. Trust emerges naturally, commitment deepens, and sustainable success becomes possible. But when purpose is absent or unclear, even the most skilled people struggle to connect, innovate, or endure challenges, and systems collapse under the weight of short-term thinking and disengagement. Trust is the first foundation built by purpose. When people understand why decisions are made, why strategies are pursued, and why leaders act as they do, they feel confident that their leaders are consistent, reliable, and aligned with values that matter. Trust is not built by titles, authority, or fear. It is built by transparency, integrity, and clarity of intent. When leaders articulate the why, people see the logic behind choices, they understand the priorities, and they can predict responses with confidence. This creates a sense of safety, a psychological space in which individuals are willing to take risks, share ideas, and speak honestly. In the absence of purpose, actions appear arbitrary, decisions seem self-serving, and doubt erodes the willingness to invest discretionary effort. Purpose bridges the gap between authority and belief, creating a foundation on which trust can flourish. Commitment is the natural outcome of trust, and it too is anchored in purpose. People are not inspired by numbers, reports, or metrics alone. They are inspired by meaning. When the why is clear, individuals feel part of something larger than themselves. They do not work solely for personal gain or external rewards. They contribute because they believe in the vision, they identify with the mission, and they feel their efforts have impact. Commitment born from purpose is resilient. It persists through setbacks, uncertainty, and pressure. Employees, team members, and communities aligned with a clear why are less likely to disengage, less likely to abandon shared goals in the face of difficulty, and more willing to collaborate, innovate, and hold themselves accountable. Without a sense of purpose, compliance can be manufactured, but commitment cannot be sustained. Sustainable success is the culmination of purpose-driven trust and commitment. Organizations that operate with a clear why do not chase fleeting victories or short-term metrics at the expense of long-term health. Instead, they make decisions with foresight, prioritize people over profit in meaningful ways, and build systems that endure. Sustainable success requires alignment between strategy, behavior, and values, and purpose is the glue that binds these elements together. When a team or organization understands its why, it can respond to challenges without losing direction, adapt to changing environments without sacrificing integrity, and innovate without compromising core principles. Purpose acts as a compass in turbulent times, keeping people oriented toward what truly matters and preventing distractions, shortcuts, or expediency from undermining long-term resilience. Purpose also has a social and relational dimension that magnifies its impact. When leaders communicate and embody the why, they create a culture where individuals feel understood, valued, and connected to one another. People are drawn to causes, not commands. They collaborate not because they are told to, but because they share belief in something bigger. This shared sense of meaning fosters empathy, reduces conflict, and encourages mutual accountability. In turn, this culture strengthens retention, engagement, and collective problem solving. Purpose-driven environments empower people to make decisions consistent with the mission, to innovate confidently, and to act with discretion, knowing they are trusted to serve a shared vision. Purpose is also a preventative force against the destructive effects of fear-based leadership, short-term thinking, and burnout. In organizations where the why is neglected, leaders often rely on pressure, incentives, or coercion to drive performance. People comply, but they do not feel inspired, and they expend energy on survival rather than contribution. Over time, this leads to exhaustion, disengagement, and high turnover. When purpose is present, however, the focus shifts from control to care, from immediate results to long-term value creation, and from individual self-interest to collective achievement. Purpose becomes a source of resilience, a reason to persevere, and a framework for decision-making that prioritizes human well-being alongside organizational outcomes. In every aspect of leadership, strategy, and collaboration, purpose underpins the ability to create lasting impact, connects people to each other, and to a shared mission. It builds trust by clarifying intentions, it inspires commitment by giving work meaning, and it ensures that success is sustainable because it is aligned with values, human needs, and long-term goals. Purpose transforms leadership from a transactional exercise into a transformative practice. It turns work into service, effort into contribution, and organizations into communities capable of enduring and thriving. Without purpose, efforts are scattered, motivation is fleeting, and systems fail. With purpose, people are guided, connected, and inspired to achieve results that endure far beyond immediate gains. Fear-based leadership is one of the most pervasive and destructive approaches in organizations, communities, and even societies, and yet it is often mistaken for strength. Leaders who rely on fear through threats, micromanagement, punitive measures, or coercion may see immediate compliance, measurable output, or short-term victories, and on the surface, it appears effective. People work harder, deadlines are met, and targets are achieved. But these are superficial indicators. Beneath the surface, fear corrodes the very foundations upon which lasting success, trust, and human potential are built. It erodes relationships, diminishes creativity, and ultimately undermines the resilience of individuals and organizations alike, creating fragility where strength was presumed. Fear may produce results in the moment, but it does so at an extraordinary cost, both human and systemic. At the core of fear-based leadership is the misconception that people are motivated primarily by punishment or threat. The idea is that if people are afraid of losing their jobs, failing to meet expectations, or facing criticism, they will comply. And compliance does occur, but it is superficial. Compliance driven by fear produces work that is safe rather than innovative, predictable rather than exceptional. People do the minimum required to avoid consequences rather than the maximum possible to contribute to a shared vision. In these environments, mistakes are punished, experimentation is discouraged, and curiosity is stifled. Fear suppresses the natural instincts that drive human growth, exploration, problem-solving, and collaboration. When people are afraid to take risks, organizations lose the ability to adapt, innovate, and evolve, leaving them vulnerable to disruption and stagnation. Fear-based leadership also destroys trust, which is the essential currency of any effective human system. When leaders govern through intimidation or threats, people cannot rely on them for consistency, support, or fairness. Every interaction becomes a test of survival rather than a collaboration. Employees, team members, and community members learn to hide information, withhold honest feedback, and avoid accountability because speaking truth to power can carry risk. Trust, once broken, is extremely difficult to rebuild. Without trust, relationships falter, engagement declines, and loyalty erodes. People may remain physically present, but emotionally and intellectually, they withdraw, leaving organizations with a workforce that is compliant but disconnected. Fear also undermines resilience. True resilience, the capacity to adapt, recover, and thrive in the face of challenges, requires psychological safety, confidence, and a sense of purpose. When individuals are constantly operating in an environment of fear, their energy is consumed by stress, anxiety, and self-protection. They are less likely to take initiative, less willing to experiment, and less capable of sustaining effort over the long term. Chronic fear leads to burnout, disengagement, and attrition. Organizations led through fear may see temporary spikes in performance, but over time, talent diminishes, institutional knowledge is lost, and the ability to respond to crisis or seize opportunities weakens. Resilience is not built under threat. It is cultivated through support, empowerment, and trust. Short-term thinking often accompanies fear-based leadership because immediate compliance and rapid results are prioritized over long-term growth, culture, and human development. Leaders focused on the next quarterly report, the next promotion, or the next visible win may ignore the slow, invisible work required to nurture people, build relationships, and establish sustainable systems. Decisions are made for expediency rather than integrity, and shortcuts are taken to deliver immediate outcomes. In the process, culture erodes, values are compromised, and systems are constructed to extract results rather than to foster growth. This creates an organization that may appear successful externally, but internally it is fragile, unstable, and disconnected from purpose. The impact of fear-based leadership extends beyond organizational performance. It affects human dignity and society at large. People subjected to fear lose confidence in their abilities, doubt their value, and question their purpose. Communities governed by intimidation or coercion suffer from inequality, mistrust, and division. When fear dictates behavior, creativity is stifled, collaboration is undermined, and social bonds weaken. Individuals, teams, and societies may survive under fear, but they do not thrive. They become reactive rather than proactive, defensive rather than generative, and resistant to change rather than adaptable. The human spirit, which thrives on trust, autonomy, and purpose, is compromised when fear is the primary motivator. In contrast, leadership that is grounded in trust, purpose, and service fosters sustainable results without eroding humanity. It recognizes that people are not cogs to be controlled, but human beings with aspirations, talents, and intrinsic motivation. It prioritizes long-term growth, psychological safety, and meaningful engagement over short-term compliance. It empowers people to take risks, innovate, and act with responsibility because they are motivated by belief rather than fear. Fear-based leadership, by contrast, is an illusion of control that achieves temporary outcomes while steadily undermining the people, systems, and cultures that are necessary for enduring success. It is a strategy that produces results today but leaves devastation in its wake tomorrow, eroding trust, diminishing resilience, and weakening the very foundation upon which leadership and progress depend. Human-centered leadership is a philosophy and practice that places people at the core of every decision, strategy, and interaction. It recognizes that organizations, communities, and teams are made up of human beings with emotions, aspirations, and unique capacities, and that their well-being is inseparable from performance, innovation, and long-term success. This approach challenges the traditional paradigm in which metrics, processes, and short-term outcomes dominate priorities, insisting instead that true leadership begins with understanding, empathy, and a commitment to serving others. Human-centered leaders see beyond the immediate tasks or outputs and focus on the conditions that allow people to thrive, contribute meaningfully, and feel a sense of purpose in their work. By putting humans first, leaders cultivate environments where trust, engagement, and creativity flourish, transforming not just the culture but the trajectory of organizations and communities. A core principle of human-centered leadership is psychological safety. People can only perform at their best when they feel secure in expressing ideas, asking questions, admitting mistakes, and challenging assumptions without fear of ridicule, punishment, or dismissal. Leaders who prioritize safety recognize that vulnerability is not weakness, but a pathway to learning and innovation. When individuals trust that their thoughts and contributions are valued, they are more likely to engage actively, share insights, and collaborate authentically. This safety fosters open dialogue, cross-functional teamwork, and the exploration of ideas that may initially seem unconventional, creating a fertile ground for problem-solving and growth that cannot exist under fear or authoritarian control. Valuing people is another central element of human-centered leadership. Beyond the recognition of contributions, valuing people involves understanding their strengths, aspirations, and challenges, and creating opportunities for them to grow and develop. It requires listening deeply, asking questions, and engaging with individuals as whole human beings rather than simply as resources or instruments for achieving goals. Leaders who are tuned to the human experience acknowledge the diverse skills, perspectives, and experiences that each person brings, and they actively work to create equitable conditions where everyone can contribute meaningfully. Valuing people also involves providing feedback that is constructive and supportive, mentoring and coaching, and advocating for opportunities that align with individual growth, as well as organizational objectives. Inspiring contribution is the third essential dimension of human-centered leadership. When leaders communicate a compelling why, articulate a meaningful vision, and connect daily work to a broader purpose, people feel motivated to invest effort beyond what is required. Inspiration is not achieved through authority or coercion. It is cultivated through alignment, authenticity, and the demonstration that leaders genuinely care about the impact of the work and the welfare of the team. Human-centered leaders understand that people are more than their outputs. They are motivated by meaning, by recognition of their humanity, and by opportunities to make a tangible difference. When individuals see that their efforts contribute to something larger than themselves, they engage with energy, creativity, and commitment that cannot be mandated but is freely given. Human-centered leadership also transforms organizational culture over time. When leaders consistently act with empathy, transparency, and fairness, they set norms for behavior and interaction that ripple throughout the organization. People observe and internalize these behaviors, creating an environment where respect, collaboration, and accountability are expected and reinforced. This cultural reinforcement strengthens loyalty, retention, and morale, as employees feel that they belong to a community rather than merely a system designed to extract output. It also attracts talent who seek environments that honor human dignity, purpose, and potential, creating a virtuous cycle in which leadership and culture mutually reinforce one another. Another critical dimension of human-centered leadership is the recognition of long-term impact over short-term gain. Decisions are made not merely to hit quarterly targets or immediate results, but to nurture sustainable growth, well-being, and collective resilience. Leaders consider the implications of policies, strategies, and actions on the people they serve, ensuring that outcomes support not only organizational goals, but also human development and engagement. This long-term perspective requires patience, foresight, and a commitment to values that extend beyond profit, efficiency, or expediency, recognizing that the true measure of success lies in the health, trust, and thriving of the people who make the organization possible. Human-centered leadership also fosters innovation and adaptability. When individuals feel safe, valued, and inspired, they are more willing to experiment, challenge assumptions, and explore new solutions. Risk-taking becomes calculated rather than paralyzing, creativity is encouraged rather than suppressed, and collaboration thrives. In contrast to environments dominated by fear or rigid hierarchy, human-centered cultures leverage the collective intelligence, curiosity, and passion of people, creating conditions where breakthrough ideas can emerge and grow. Ultimately, human-centered leadership is both a mindset and a practice. It requires leaders to consistently prioritize the human experience, to act with empathy, integrity, and purpose, and to build systems, processes, and cultures that honor people as the essential element of success. By fostering psychological safety, valuing contributions, inspiring commitment, reinforcing positive culture, emphasizing long-term impact, and enabling innovation, human-centered leaders transform environments into spaces where individuals feel motivated, empowered, and fulfilled. This approach not only elevates performance, but also strengthens resilience, trust, and sustainability, creating organizations and communities where people are not just present, but fully engaged, capable of reaching their highest potential, and committed to shared success. Long-term thinking and service to something bigger than oneself are the hallmarks of leadership that creates lasting impact. In a world obsessed with immediate results, quarterly profits, and short-term visibility, it is easy to forget that true progress, innovation, and transformation require a perspective that extends beyond the next deadline, the next promotion, or the next report. Leaders who focus solely on immediate outcomes may achieve superficial success, but they often fail to leave a meaningful legacy. The decisions they make prioritize expediency over integrity, convenience over principle, and self-interest over collective well-being. In contrast, leaders who adopt a long-term mindset and commit themselves to a purpose greater than personal gain understand that enduring impact is not produced in isolated victories, but through consistent, intentional, and service-oriented action that benefits people, organizations, and society over time. Long-term thinking begins with clarity of purpose. It requires leaders to understand why they do, what they stand for, and the principles that guide their decisions. Without this clarity, choices become reactive, opportunistic, and ultimately hollow. Purpose acts as a compass orienting leaders toward decisions that are aligned with values, mission, and the greater good. When leaders make decisions with a long-term perspective, they consider not only immediate outcomes, but also how their actions will affect people, culture, systems, and communities in the years to come. This foresight allows them to build strategies and structures that are resilient, adaptable, and capable of withstanding change and uncertainty, rather than simply optimizing for the next short-term metric. Service to something bigger than oneself is inseparable from long-term thinking. Leadership is not primarily about personal gain, recognition, or status. It is about using influence, authority, and resources to benefit others. Leaders who embrace this principle recognize that the highest purpose of their position is to protect, develop, and empower the people they lead, to strengthen the organizations and communities they serve, and to contribute to a cause that transcends personal ambition. When leadership is approached as service, decisions are evaluated not just by the results they produce today, but by the lasting effects they will have on culture, trust, human development, and societal impact. Service creates alignment between individual actions and collective well-being, ensuring that success is not fleeting or isolated, but shared and sustained. Leaders who combine long-term thinking with service create environments where people can thrive. They understand that human potential, creativity, and resilience cannot be extracted through pressure, fear, or transactional incentives. Instead, they cultivate trust, provide clarity of purpose, and empower individuals to contribute their best work because they feel valued, safe, and connected to something meaningful. This approach strengthens loyalty, engagement, and discretionary effort, as people are motivated not solely by rewards or punishment, but by a belief in the vision, a sense of belonging, and a commitment to shared goals. Organizations led in this way are able to weather adversity, innovate in the face of complexity, and sustain growth without sacrificing human dignity or long-term viability. Long-term thinking also fostered adaptability. Leaders who prioritize the future anticipate changes in technology, markets, culture, and society. They prepare their organizations to respond with agility rather than react with panic. By focusing on sustainable structures, talent development, and cultural health, these leaders create systems capable of evolving alongside external challenges. Their decisions may require patience, incremental progress, or delayed gratification, but the outcomes are more durable because they are grounded in foresight, principles, and the well-being of those who will inherit the results. Short-term thinking, in contrast, may yield temporary gains, but leaves organizations vulnerable to collapse, disengagement, and loss of trust. Service to something bigger than oneself also inspires others to act with purpose. When leaders model dedication to a higher cause, they motivate those around them to invest their energy, creativity, and commitment in pursuit of shared objectives. People follow leaders who demonstrate that leadership is not about power, ego, or accumulation, but about making a positive difference. This influence extends beyond immediate teams to entire organizations, communities, and networks, creating ripple effects that magnify impact. Individuals inspired by service-driven leadership are more likely to mentor, support, and collaborate with others, creating a culture of generosity, accountability, and resilience. Long-term thinking and service are mutually reinforcing. Service motivates leaders to consider consequences beyond themselves, naturally encouraging a longer-term perspective. Conversely, a long-term mindset prioritizes sustainability, ethical stewardship, and human-centered decisions, which align with the principles of service. Together, they shift leadership from a transactional exercise to a transformational practice. Decisions become measured not by instant gratification, but by enduring value. Systems are built to support collective success, and cultures cultivated to withstand stress, change, and challenges. Leaders who embrace this dual focus are able to create organizations, communities, and movements that endure, inspire, and contribute meaningfully to human progress. Ultimately, the impact of long-term thinking and service to something bigger than oneself extends far beyond immediate results. It shapes culture, builds trust, nurtures human potential, and strengthens systems. It transforms leadership from a role of authority into a practice of stewardship, where the measure of success is the growth, resilience, and flourishing of people and communities. Leaders who act with this mindset leave legacies that outlast tenure, metrics, and titles, creating influence that is not temporary but enduring, rooted in purpose, empathy, and a commitment to serving causes greater than themselves. The essence of leadership is not the title you hold, the authority you wield, or the rewards you accumulate. True leadership begins with service, guided by a clear purpose and grounded in trust, empathy, and long-term thinking. Leaders who act from fear may achieve short-term results, but they erode humanity, creativity, and resilience. Leaders who put people first, communicate their why, and commit to something bigger than themselves create cultures where individuals feel safe, valued, and inspired to contribute. They cultivate trust, foster engagement, and build systems capable of sustaining impact over time. Leadership is a responsibility, not a reward. It is a choice to serve, to protect, and to empower others, even when the work is difficult and the results are not immediate. When we lead with purpose, humility, and service, we inspire commitment, strengthen communities, and leave a legacy that endures far beyond any individual achievement. The call is clear. Embrace leadership as service. Think long-term, act with integrity, and dedicate yourself to causes greater than yourself, because it is through this approach that we create lasting impact, meaningful progress, and a world where people and organizations truly thrive.